Truth, Mark Benschop, defend the ghetto youth. Mark Benschop, radio station is the fruit. Mark Benschop, straight up from the root. Mark Benschop, who tell the truth. Mark Benschop, defend the ghetto youth. Mark Benschop, radio station is the fruit. Mark Benschop, straight up from the root. Mark Benschop, I do it for the love, him not do it for no money. Straight up, him attack, educating everybody. Big up my friends and big up my family. Turn on the radio, catch the vibes, it's integrity. Straight up, Benschop stands for unity. One people, one nation, one destiny. Free up the truth in the air, even the blind can see. The deaf can hear, the dumb can talk, the cripple can walk. Boom, who tell the truth? Mark Benschop, defend the ghetto youth. Mark Benschop, radio station is the fruit. Mark Benschop, straight up from the root. Mark Benschop, who tell the truth? Mark Benschop, defend the ghetto youth. Mark Benschop, radio station is the fruit. Mark Benschop, straight up from the root. Mark Benschop, we have to gather wrong, grab a seat and sit down, pay attention, education, liberation, we have to stand strong. Benschop upon the radio, lively up the program. Everybody call somebody and let them turn and tune and on the radio and catch the boom song. We boom it up already, we have to boom it up again. Expose and reveal him, who tell the truth. Mark Benschop, defend the ghetto youth. Mark Benschop, radio station is the fruit. Mark Benschop, straight up from the root. Mark Benschop, who tell the truth. Mark Benschop, defend the ghetto youth. Mark Benschop, radio station is the fruit. Mark Benschop, straight up from the root. Mark Benschop, I do it for the love, him not do it for no money. Straight up, him attack, educating everybody. Big up my friends and big up my family. Turn on the radio, catch the vibes, it's integrity. Straight up, Benschop stands for unity. One people, one nation, one destiny. Free up the truth in the air, even the blind can see. The deaf can hear, the dumb can talk, the cripple can walk. Boom, who tell the truth? Mark Benschop, defend the ghetto youth. Mark Benschop, radio station is the fruit. Mark Benschop, straight up from the root. Mark Benschop, who tell the truth? Mark Benschop, defend the ghetto youth. Mark Benschop, radio station is the fruit. Mark Benschop, straight up from the root. Mark Benschop.
This is attorney Shellen Washington, owner and founder of the Washington Law Firm, located at 455 Utica Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. We're specialized in medical malpractice, personal injuries, matrimonial law, and landlord and tenant. If you're in need of legal representation, please give us a call today. The number to call is 718-877-3100. Consultation is free at no cost to you, so call us today to see if we can be of any assistance to your legal needs. Again, the phone number to call us is 718-877-3100.
Hi, good evening. Welcome to Straight Up. We're not going to waste much time. We just have 1 hour. We're going to rock and roll for that 1 hour. I guess, hey, tell you what, just share the link and let people know that we're on. This is a live show. It's the 13th day of February. You know, tomorrow happens to be that 14th day, and you know what happens on the 14th day, right? That doesn't, the little reddish kind of tie that I'm wearing doesn't have anything to do with tomorrow. But look, it's really nice to be back with you guys. I know I've been missing in action, so to speak, on this particular show, but it doesn't mean that overall I've been missing in action. I've been around doing my thing, right? All right, so hey, do me a quick favor. I don't want to keep repeating this because some folks might not know that I'm back, that I'm live. Do share the link. We have a special guest with us this evening, and let me say, why is this person so special with us this evening? Her name is Angeline Butler. If you do Google her name, you will see what she represents. You will see who she is. She's currently teaching at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. And, you know, she was also part of the civil rights struggle. She's still part of that. She has been there with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. She has been there with Mr. Lafayette. She has been there with the late Congressman John Lewis. She has been there with them in the struggle, front seat. She has been there. And I want to ask her some questions this evening. And then after that, you know, whatever else we want to talk about, right? All right. Good evening again. Spread the word, share the link, let the people know that we are in the house. Speaking of in the house, look at the house. And I want Angeline Butler, Ms. Butler, when she comes on, she can definitely see what's happening. Look at those are homes being built, so-called houses being built by the installed regime of Guyana. And it is being built and being, what is it? Ordinary folks have to pay. This is being built in swamp areas. Swamp areas. This is supposedly a country, oil-rich country. And Irfan, the installed president, and all these people, they love to describe it as the little Dubai, and it's a rich country. We might be rich, but they're stealing the bulk of the money. And they want people to live in this. Now, this might be luxury for some people, don't get me wrong, but this is a success story for these individuals who are currently ruining the country, running the country, so to speak. This is how they want to live. This is how they want to live, but this is how they want the people to live. You get where I'm coming from? They want the people who are the taxpayers. These politicians are blood suckers. They're sucking the blood of the people. They're robbing the people. They're robbing taxpayers, and they want taxpayers to live like this. And meanwhile, this is how they want to live. Look at the swimming pool or the pool house or whatever. That's Irfan Ali's pool house. This is not propaganda. You guys know we're not into propaganda at all. If you want propaganda, go to somewhere else. Go to the shows with those Mickey Mouse kind of guys, those cartoon characters. Go over to them, those funny hair kind of guys, those funny kind of looking guys too. Go over to them. But look, on a serious note too, 5 million Guyana dollars. Taxpayers' monies. Irfan Ali and his goons and his friends in the private sector commission, this is what they're doing. It's a business for them. They're not concerned about the ordinary people. They're not concerned about you. They're just not concerned. So they found a swamp area and they're putting these houses. It's not even building. They're just knocking two boards together and calling it a house and selling it to people for $5 million. And their friends and cronies and concubines are the ones who get the profit and the benefit out of this. This is no policy. It is nothing at all. But we are going to get back to the house issue later because we do have our guest, Miss Angeline Butler. She's backstage. She's waiting for us. Before we get there, though, Region 6, farmers are struggling. Farmers are punishing. But look at the lies of these people. Region 6 farmers to benefit from major infrastructure, something that these kunumunus haven't been able to do for 23 years. They've neglected the farmers. They've neglected almost every single thing they have done. Neglected everything. Every single thing they have done. Now, suddenly they're talking about, Region 6 farmers to benefit from major infrastructure and all manner of things. Just listen to these kunumunus, right? Just listen to them. All right, we'll get back into that shortly because, it's like a racehorse now running off and you want to get stuff going, right? Yeah. Oops, there we go. Lemon decided to put Barry Dataram, wanted by the United States law enforcement agencies for many, many years. And this guy thought that he could renew his U.S. passport. He can hop on a plane. Of course, there's some serious skullduggery happened at Tamari Airport. So he was able to get through there without law enforcement authority being notified over in the U.S. But when he got to the U.S., that's where they nabbed him. So he's currently in a jail cell somewhere in Brooklyn. But guess what? Look at his race. Look at his race, right? Barry Dataram has been on the extradition list for so many years, but he thought it was over. There's a sealed indictment. There was a sealed indictment for him. They opened that indictment, just like there are lots of sealed indictments for a lot of other individuals in Guyana who are pomposetting themselves as businessmen, philanthropists. You know what I mean? Love their fancy cars and all manner of things. Look out for those people. Some of them are fighting it in court. Some of them have gotten their visas revoked, and they're fighting it in court because they feel that they got money, because, a lot of them just got rich overnight and they want to spend the money so that they can fight their extradition, they can fight their visa revocation. Lots of other things they want to fight. But in the end, are they going to win? Let's prepare to go to Miss Angeline Butler. Miss Angeline Butler seems to be ready for us. This is a picture of the sit-in. This is a picture of the sit-in. I recognize a couple of people there in that, but Miss Butler is with us right now. Good evening. How are you?
Oh, I'm fine. How are you?
I am quite well, thank you. Good to see you. I haven't seen you in so many years, though, but really nice to see you.
Why don't you tell the audience where you were when you last saw me?
Oh man, they probably should know by now. But one of the places I was sitting in a classroom, you were teaching African studies, African American studies, and there you were, and I was in your classroom, and the rest is history, right? How have you been?
How long ago was that?
That was a long time ago. Don't let them know, because they're going to start counting my age.
Oh.
How have you been, though?
No, I've been fine. Life has its ups and downs as usual, but the guru says when life is down, meditate, be quiet, and then look on the other side of that down and see where you're going. And I do that.
Absolutely. Meditate and see where you're going. You have been meditating for quite some time. I showed this photograph, which is the Nashville sit-in. These are the students.
That's Matthew Walker, Peggy Alexander, Diane Nash, Hempel, Stanley Hempel. Those were two in leadership.
All right, tell us a little bit, because I know you've been in the forefront of the struggle, the civil rights struggles, and so forth and so on. You have rubbed shoulders, so to speak, with a lot of individuals: Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., John Lewis, Congressman John Lewis, and others. But first, give us a brief background as to Angeline Butler. Maybe I should have been doing that, but you tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm brought up on a farm in South Carolina. And so in my early days before I was in school, I picked cotton, pulled fodder. And we had a 50-acre farm. And we also I was in Eastover, South Carolina, outside of the capital, Columbia, South Carolina. My father, Reverend Isaac Bartley Butler, he was the principal of the school, the Crossroads Elementary School, where I attended. And he was a mathematician. He was also a farmer and a minister. And Mrs. Butler, she was also a principal of a school until they got married. They had those one-room schoolhouses in the South, okay, where people were donating space because they didn't elect to have Black teachers in the school system. So on my mother's farm, they had a one-room schoolhouse, and it was called, the Forks Hill School. And then in my father's a community in Greenville, South Carolina, they had the similar kind of schools. And his father was a preacher, teacher, and a farmer, okay? And a wonderful community leader, Reverend Thomas Butler of Pelzer, South Carolina. My father's name was Reverend Isaac Bartley Butler of Eastover. And by the way, South Carolina acknowledged him and honored him twice before he died in 2000. He died in basically 2000 and 2003, like that. But my background, the reason I talk about, having been a country girl, that put me in touch with nature and meditation. I was already in that mode when I went to school because we lived on that farm. We had dealt with the natural animals. We emulated the sounds of animals. We woke up with the sunshine each morning and we went fishing, in our own pond. Okay. So meditation had always been, and quiet, as a place to really find yourself and search, where you wanted to go, had always been a part of my life. And so that extended into the period where I went to college. And then all of a sudden I was faced with, quote, segregation that I had never experienced as a young girl. Protected us. They took us everywhere. We were not the ones who had to encounter the insults or had to worry about the house being burned down or for some reason having said the wrong thing and the KKK could come in your house like they did with Emmett Till and take your husband out and lynch him. Okay, so they were educators. They built the respect that they had in the community. And when I first took that bus going from South Carolina to Fisk University in Nashville, my father, for the first time in my life, had to come on the bus, remove me from the front seat where I had sat down because I didn't have any awareness. I never rode a public bus. And he moved me to the back of the bus. And driver would not move until Reverend Butler came on that bus and moved me to the back seat and told me to stay there. I was very angry with him for about a year because I didn't understand why he didn't speak up at that point. I did not understand because I had never been in that situation. And I was used to my father protecting me and always, being proud of me. And I was Reverend Butler's talented young daughter that he prided so much, who got scholarships to go to college and stuff, but yet he had to put me in the back of the bus. Okay.
We will so definitely get speaking of the back of the bus, it's Black History Month. We want to touch on that a little bit. And thank you for that little brief background of that country girl out there in South Carolina. We do have something in
common. The Greyhound bus going from Columbia, South Carolina to Nashville, Tennessee.
Sending you off to university there, right?
Yeah, exactly. First year of college. And when I went to, because I was so mad with him, I drank a lot the first year. I drank wine, okay? And I always, like in the dormitory and stuff, you're not supposed to keep wine and stuff like that. So I kept getting put on social probation by the dormitory mother. I was in rebellion, you understand? But then I was noticed by Dr. John Work, who was the Jubilee singer conductor. And I was in the music department. And he noticed my voice and he noticed my musical ear. And he began to invite me to his home. I hope I've turned that down enough that you don't hear it.
That's okay.
And so he began to take an interest in me musically, to share his compositions and things with me. And he and his wife kind of provided a family, and I began to calm down. And then the president of the university, Stephen J. Wright, who was the first, quote, Black complected president, okay, I mean, really dark, in 1957 to 61, because Dr. Wright and his wife took an interest in me. So they began to invite me to their home, and I began to plant flowers with his wife, Rosalind. So these two families began to, invite me often enough that they made me feel comfortable. So I stopped drinking and I became a better Fiskite, okay? And I began to listen to the music of the Jubilee singers. Well, 1 year later, Reverend Martin Luther King was brought for the spring festival, Dr. Stephen J. Wright. And while he was there, I had the chance introduced him as being, the person we needed to look to in the future years, because in terms of leadership. And of course he was correct. I mean, because, we saw how history, lived itself out. But anyway, I was able to talk to him for about an hour because he was the guest of Dr. and Mrs. Stephen J. Wright. And they allowed me to take him to the Fisk Gallery, art gallery, where you have famous painters like Aaron Douglas, Black painters. And I was able to show Martin Luther King around, and then he would talk to me about what they'd done in the Greensboro movement. So that was my first introduction to Martin Luther King. I spent an hour with him, and then I took him back over to Dr. Wright's home. Anyway,
let's just stick a pin there for a moment. If we can just stick a pin for a moment, please. I know you're excited, and I know our listeners want to know. This is basically Black History Month, and we have with us Angeline Butler. She was there from the inception during the civil rights struggles. She has rubbed shoulders, as you're hearing, with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and others. We will get into the and others shortly. But you guys are very, very young back then. Dr. Martin Luther King was in his early 20s. I'm sure you were younger then as well. How would you describe that interaction with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? Your first interaction?
Well, the point is, he was telling me about Montgomery, and I didn't know very much about it, because I came from South Carolina. I didn't come from Alabama, okay? And I came also from the rural part of the state, and we didn't have much access to what was going on in the other states, So everything he was telling me basically was new about Rosa Parks, about the Highlander Folk School, where Miles Horton, for instance, allowed them to meet a lot, and really the Highlander Folk School and Septima Poinsett Clark, who was teaching there at that time, she's the founder of the citizenship schools. And she trained Rosa Parks. And that's why Rosa Parks kept her seat on the bus that day. And nobody ever mentions that. But Rosa Parks, if you look at her resume, she has Highlander Folk School in there as being one of the main educators of her. Now, that's back in 1954, okay? That's before the murder of Emmett Till. And then, of course, Rosa Parks and E.D. Nixon were the head of the NAACP in Montgomery. They were going very often to the Highlander Folk School. And then, of course, 55 comes, and you have the murder of Emmett Till, and in Mississippi, a 14-year-old boy, and this young white girl claims that he whistled at her, and the people, her family, went in there in the night with the KKK, and they took him out of his grandmother's house. He was visiting from Detroit for the summer, and as it turns out, he really didn't do anything, but they took him out in the middle of the night, and they killed him. And they tied him to a mill wheel and put him under the Mississippi River. Now, that sparked a lot more interest from Black people, because they said, they were so outraged that everybody was saying, we got to do something. We just can't be, we can't stand by and let that kind of thing happen to us. And so when Rosa kept her seat on that bus and refused to move to the back of the bus, she accepted arrest. She said, "You may do that. You may arrest me." And they took her to jail. Now, Martin Luther King had only recently come to Montgomery, Alabama. And he was like 25 years old with a young wife, and he had one kid at that point, and I think one on the way. And E.D. Nixon from the NAACP, and Rosa Parks was the secretary for the NAACP at that point. Well, E.D. Nixon went over to visit this new minister, and he heard him speak, and he was so impressed. It was E.D. Nixon who invited Martin Luther King to be the leader of the Montgomery movement and to speak on behalf of the people. But let's remember, if it had not been for Rosa Parks keeping her seat on that bus, we would probably never have heard of Martin Luther King, okay? So I like to call it the Rosa Parks movement as opposed to the King movement, okay? These ministers, they sort of coined the phrase King movement, but they never give women their fair due, because it was Rosa Parks who began that movement, not King.
But let me ask you, and thanks for letting us know, because this is Black History Month. A lot of folks, young people, are learning about Rosa Parks. They're learning about others. But before Rosa Parks who refused to give her seat up, there was this woman. Describe a little bit about this girl, 15 years old. She was convicted under Alabama segregation law.
Well,
She refused.
yeah,
Claudette.
You're talking about Claudette Colvin.
Yes.
She's on my bulletin board, if you can see that far in the back. I don't know that you can, but I have a picture up there of Claudette Colvin and me. And we were at a conference in Newark at one of the schools. And the story on Claudette Colvin was that she was not only young, she was unmarried, and she was pregnant at the time. And she fought the drivers and the police when they came. So that display of violence already was against the nonviolent movement, okay? And the fact that she was young, unmarried, and pregnant. The NAACP surrounded her and they got her out of jail, but they did not want to use this person as the sort of center of what needed to be done. And they waited until they had another case, and that was Rosa Parks later on. Now, Claudette Colvin was actually studying in Rosa Parks' youth workshop. So they're all intertwined. And of course, since Rosa Parks became the center of attention and legal and really, credibly so, because she was, first of all, a working woman. She was married. She was in her 50s when that happened to her. And there was no reason she should have to give up her seat for someone who was half her age.
You're saying that who was in their 50s when that happened?
Rosa Parks.
Oh, Rosa Parks was in her 50s when what happened again? Sorry.
When she got arrested. She was not a young person. She wasn't old, but she was like approaching 50 years old, when she got arrested.
Rosa Parks?
Claudette Colvin. Yeah, Rosa Parks. I don't know the exact age, okay? She may have been 40s, okay? But the point is, she was a middle-aged woman working. Okay. And she was tired, and she was working for a white family sewing. And she was tired. She said she didn't see any reason to give up her seat to a young white man who was half her age. The four people around her. And she was already in the black section of the bus.
We are seeing that when Rosa Parks was actually arrested, she was a secretary there at the local NAACP.
NAACP, right? That's what I said.
When you spoke, because I know you're friends with Claudette, the first person who we know that refused to give up her seat.
Can I tell you something?
Sure.
Can I tell you something? She's not the first person who refused to give up her seat. The Congress on Racial Equality since 1942 had been working in the South, in the North, having sit-ins, stage-ins. Teachers at Fisk University told me about students sitting in 1935 at Fisk. It's just that they didn't have a through line. They didn't develop a movement. So sit-ins have been going on for a very long time.
Let us, since we're in the subject of sit-ins, and Angeline Butler, for some of you who want to, you can Google her after the show so that you can know that her involvement is not something staged. She has been there. You have been arrested on numerous occasions along with others as a young student standing up for your rights. Yeah. Describe the times that you guys, when you guys were arrested, and the conditions under which you guys were kept, and for how long.
Okay, I need to go back further than that, because you got to understand, we were in Nashville. We were in nonviolent workshops since 1959. Now, the first major arrest in the South didn't come until February 27th, 1960. That was 106 students in Nashville. Okay. Now, the guys in Greensboro, 4 guys that sat in that they say started the movement, They were young men going off to war from AT&T College. And they said, well, why can't, I might lose my life, like over in Vietnam or wherever, or the Korean, I think it's Vietnam or the Korean War. I don't know which one it was.
It would have been probably Vietnam at that time.
Vietnam, right. So why can't I go downtown and have lunch? You understand, in a place where we spend money, our families, spend their dollars and stuff. And so they did that, and they got national attention. Now, the next day, they went back and took about 25 students from AT&T. But then they didn't do anything after that. So Nashville, who had been testing since 1959 and in nonviolent workshops, and we had a lot of students that were in our workshops with Jim Lawson, C.T. Vivian, Reverend Metz Rollins. We said, well, let's not let that die out. They beat us to the draw, you understand? But let's send a massive demonstration. So February 13th, as follow-up, we put roughly about 150 students in Nashville at different lunch counters. And then the next one we had maybe 200 or 300 students sitting all over Nashville, any place, and that was February 20th. Now we got word on February 27th from the chief of police to tell the students not to come downtown today, because if they do, they will be arrested. And these were Saturdays, okay? Because we weren't doing it full time at that point. It was still, we were concerned about being in school and make sure that we were staging the demonstrations at times when students weren't in class. And that February 27th morning, the 15 of us that were on the Central Committee, it's called the Nashville Student Nonviolent Central Committee is what we were called. And John Lewis was on the committee, Bernard Lafayette, James Bevel, Peggy, those four people that you just saw sitting there, Matthew Walker, Peggy Alexander, Diane Nash, and Stanley Hemphill. And, some students from Harry Metal, Powell, from NC State A&I, Kenneth Frazier, Curtis Murphy, and Lucretia Collins, and we had, there were there are 15 of us, okay? I can't bring up the names to everybody right now. Anyway, we sat there that morning trying to figure out, should we go downtown? Because, we always just talk to each other, and it would come to consensual vote. And then, we'd talk to each other, and then, it was would act on that. But this morning we couldn't do that because going to jail, we didn't know how we're going to be treated in Nashville jails. We didn't know what would happen to our parents who were far away, like my parents in South Carolina, Jim Bevel's parents in Mississippi, John Lewis's parents in Georgia, Bernard Lafayette's parents in Alabama. Because the KKK was so strong, all I have to do is make a phone call. And they make a phone call, and they burn your house down, they lynch you, they do anything, and then there's still no accountability, okay? So we knew of that. We had to really say and face that reality that not just what would happen to us, but what was going to happen to our families as a result of going to jail. So we went upstairs after we finally, the first time we ever took a vote in the committee, and we had 7 people for going downtown. We had 6 people for not going downtown and 1 abstention. And we said, okay, that's close, and we need to take that upstairs to the students. And we were expecting, 100 students that morning, just like we'd had the other 2 demonstrations. We had only 44 students upstairs. We told them about it. We told them the risk. And one by one, all of those students raised their hand to go downtown that morning. And what we did was we would have small groups of 6 and 7, and we would go from different directions to different counters. To Woolworths, to McClellan's, 5 and Dime, to the department store, Kane and Sloan, to the bus station where you saw them sitting in.
And again, Miss Butler, the objective at that time, it was segregation, and you guys wanted to defy that sort of illegality of segregation, so you will go and have sit-ins. This is
Right.
what you're describing at this time. Let us go
Exactly.
to after you would have gotten to the sit-ins and so forth, and the arrest. And what was it like after arrested? What was the treatment like when you guys were in the lockups?
Well, they would put us in these they would put us in these paddy wagons and take us downtown. My group that morning at McClellan's was the first group arrested. But before they arrested us, we had a white student in the group and two white students, one girl and one boy. Laura Green was in my group. She was an exchange student at Fisk, and Paul LaPrade. Two young white guys pulled him off of the counter stool and stomped him and beat him. And we couldn't do, of course, anything about it or respond, so we're sitting there. So whenever you see that famous picture of a white student being beaten by two other white students, that's my group that morning at McClellan's 5 and Dimes.
And you were right there. You guys were standing there watching that.
We were sitting at the counter.
And
they pulled him off. They pulled the white student off the counter.
And couldn't do anything. You couldn't do anything at all watching.
No, because we had nonviolence as our philosophy and our strategy. And if we would try to rescue him or to fight back or push those guys, it would cause a riot.
But let me ask you this. And even though we already know what the answer is, but what was the reason for those white cops grabbing those two white students, and stamping on them? What was the message?
No, it wasn't the cops that did it.
Oh,
these were just two young guys in the store.
Okay. White guys.
White guys.
Good. They were doing that as a result to send a message to student. Yeah. Go ahead.
They hate white people that are considered sympathizers participating with black students. So they picked on him. They didn't pick on me, and they didn't pick on Matthew Walker, and they picked on the white student that was with us, Paul LaPrade. They beat him up terribly. So now the police came in. They arrested the guys that beat him, and they arrested Paul. And they made us get off the stools, and then they roped off the section and pushed us outside of the store door. And when I realized that we weren't being arrested, we're just being thrown out of the store, I pulled everybody back into the store, and we stepped over the ropes and sat at the counters again. And then now they came back and arrested us too. And then they did that type of thing all day long until there were no more room in the jail, 106 students. Now,
106 students. 106 students in the jail. You were there with others. Describe the treatment in jail.
Right. Well, the black boys and the black girls were in cells next to each other. So we could talk to each other. We were singing. We were happy.
What were you guys singing? What were you guys singing?
We were singing Negro spirituals.
We shall overcome?
No, we weren't. That was something that came to us later. We weren't singing We Shall Overcome.
What were you guys
we weren't
singing?
Singing at all. We were singing the spirituals and stuff that we knew from the Jubilee singers at Fisk. We were singing things that we knew out of the church. We Shall Overcome was introduced to us later on by Pete Seeger, the folk singer, and Guy Carawan, okay, because that was part of the labor movement. It wasn't originally a part of the sit-ins. The sit-ins, we didn't sing. We're singing now in jail because we can't go nowhere. We're confined.
So when you guys were singing in jail, what were the wardens doing? What were they saying? Were they nice to you guys? Were they?
They were amazed. They were amazed. They were amazed at the energy and the cheerfulness of the students and stuff, because it's very different from the regular people that they lock up.
Good. Did they house you guys with the regular people?
Huh?
Were you guys with the regular people? Were you guys with the regular prisoners?
No, we were not like the regular prisoners. Other prisoners that were up there, they got arrested for stealing, for murder, for beating up people.
So they didn't put you guys together.
No, they separated us. In every jail that I went to, they separated us from the regular prisoners. Okay.
The first time you guys got arrested was for how long? How long did you spend in the jail?
Well, we were there almost, in Nashville, we were there almost 2 weeks. okay? Because we refused, we went jail, no bail, okay? Now, the longest time that that's not the only place I've been arrested. But here's the funny thing is, like 2 weeks after we got out of jail, you know, because our guys, our legal team, Z. Alexander Luby, who was a friend of Thurgood Marshall's, that was our legal team. And they wanted to appeal that trespassing and loitering, okay? Now, 2 weeks after we got out of jail, we had to turn ourselves in again because now the governor brought up a charge against us, conspiracy to obstruct trade and commerce. Now, this one was amazing. You go back to that picture that you showed of the 4 people sitting at the bus stop. Matthew Walker's father was a surgeon. That's Matthew Walker. And he had 2 children in jail. He had Matthew and he had Maxine, who was in my group. And so they charged us with conspiracy to obstruct trade and commerce. We had to turn ourselves in. And now instead of $50, which was the charge, trespassing and loitering, this was $500 for each student, and they would not accept land as bail for anybody under 21. And they meant to keep us in jail, you know, because they know $500 at that time in 1960 is a lot of money. You know, that's what the tuition was at Fisk, okay? And at American Baptist Theological Seminary, the tuition was only like about $200 or $250. At Tennessee A&I, it was maybe $350, okay? Fisk was like at $500. But families had to work real hard to get that $250, that $350, and that, you know, and also not to have that student at home working to help them make money, okay? So, because most of them were living on farmlands, weren't living in cities necessarily. Now, I want to skip along because it's such a long story. Now, that's 1961. And then, of course, we had the experience with, the adult community. The Nashville Christian Leadership Conference.
If you can stick a pin, please, Ms. Butler, if you can, we'd appreciate it. You did mention Thurgood Marshall being part of the legal team. He was a big wig back then. He later became the first African-American to be nominated and, of course, serve in the U.S. Supreme Court, the first Black U.S. Supreme Court justice. Describe him a little bit for us. We know he was a legal heavyweight.
Okay, now, see, I met Thurgood Marshall not in Nashville because he was an advisor to Z. Alexander Luby, which I actually didn't know at the time, our legal team, okay? He was at Highlander Folk School, where Septima Poinsett Clark was conducting those educational workshops in citizenship, where Rosa Parks was often visiting, and E.D. Nixon, who appointed Martin Luther King as the leader in Alabama, okay? But I met Thurgood Marshall at a workshop weekend where Highlander invited us after we had gone to jail that second time, okay, for conspiracy. We needed a rest. We needed a retreat. So we went to Highlander, which is in the mountains, okay? And if you know about Highlander Folk School, white people referred to it in the community as that, quote, communist school, because they were dealing with labor movements, they were dealing with community groups, and they were dealing with Black people trying to organize themselves in Alabama, the Montgomery Negro Improvement Association. Now, the funny thing about Thurgood Marshall, I mean, he was just a regular guy. You know, he didn't say much. He was there more as an observer because he wanted to know what was going on, and he wanted to know the thinking behind what everybody was doing. And that's what, you know, and they wanted to know what we were thinking as students. So he was listening more than speaking. They introduced him because, you know, he was working on Brown versus Board of Education and was successful on that in 1954. And he had a team of 18 people working with him, including our college president, Dr. Stephen J. Wright, John Hope Franklin, who wrote
which is something that you guys have been fighting against to the segregation. And Brown versus
Right.
the school board brought
Right.
Thurgood Marshall into real prominence, public.
Yeah.
But go
Well,
ahead.
the thing is that the community, the adult community, okay, the SCLCs, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, that's Martin Luther King's organization, and then the off branches of that, like the Nashville Christian Leadership Conference, that was in Nashville, and that was the group that got us involved with the nonviolent workshops, okay, and they moved those workshops from downtown to a more convenient place at the church so that students could come, okay, at night. And we did that every Tuesday night, the nonviolent workshops with Jim Lawson and all those ministers, Kelly Miller Smith. Anyway, it's such a big story, you know, so I want to make sure that I don't just sort of stick on one point, okay? So Thurgood Marshall was very active as a lawyer in the South, even before Brown versus Board of Education. He worked with Septima Poinsett Clark in the Charleston schools, trying to get equal pay for the Black teachers in the Calhoun County schools because they weren't being paid. You know, first they wouldn't let them teach, okay? But even before that, they wouldn't let Black folks be taught to read and write, okay? There was a law in South Carolina for that. And so Septima Poinsett Clark gathered over 2,000 signatures on that issue, and Thurgood Marshall helped organize to the courts, okay? And they were eventually successful, but it took a long time, you know. So he was, in 1940s, he was in California. He was fighting for Latinos to go to Los Angeles schools, like white people, right? As opposed to the mission schools they had for them. You know, he has a tremendous history, Thurgood Marshall.
A history, of course, we want to acknowledge, we want to recognize Thurgood Marshall, Justice Thurgood Marshall, the first African-American to sit in the U.S. Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court. We recognize and we salute him this evening, the late Thurgood Marshall. But we're looking at the time, moving away from Thurgood Marshall. We know that you have rubbed shoulders, and you and I have spoken on several occasions about your relationship, your friendship during the struggle, so to speak, with this guy
Well,
here.
John was one of us. He's one of the Central Committee in Nashville. So we did everything together.
Tell us about John, young John Lewis.
Young John Lewis would speak up, and he could recruit. And, you know, he was not the person who dreamt up what the action should be. That was James Bevel. That was Angeline Butler, because we were the creative strategians, you might say. But what we mean by that is you have to look beyond where you demonstrate to see what you want to accomplish from the demonstrations, okay? So he was not the person to dream up strategy, but boy, could he talk to people and get them involved. And he could also, he just was there. Once he made a commitment, John Lewis was always there. You know, I saw John before he died in New York. He came several years ago, and they gave he spoke. And the teachers at John Jay, because they know I know him, and they know I was with him in the 60s, they wanted me to go. And so I went, and I went backstage, and I said, John, how are you doing? He says, you're the only person here that asked me how I'm doing. He said, all these other people are interested in what actions I'm taking in the Congress. He says, but you asked me how I am. And he said, and that's really important. And I just thought that was really beautiful, you know.
It's important because you guys gone way back. I recall once I tried to convince you to pick the phone up, call John Lewis so that I can get an interview with him, Congressman John Lewis. And I knew that you guys were very close. What was it like, that impact, to lose such a strong individual like John Lewis, somebody that you have been there with in the trenches?
You like lost one of the best friends you have, because you all went through so much together. You were in and out of jail together. You were in and out of each other's homes. You were, the sit-in students, we still maintain our relationships with each other.
He got
Lafayette.
an award. He got an award from the president then, President Obama.
Yeah, he
Presidential
deserved
award.
John Lewis deserved 3 awards like that. You know what I mean? Because he never stopped doing what he was doing. Okay, and a lot of people, participated in the sit-ins and the freedom rides and stuff, and then they just sort of, died out, and they kind of like. Didn't demonstrate anymore. But John Lewis forever, he never let it go. And of course, they've got the bill that they're trying to pass, the John Lewis civil rights bill, voting rights bill. And I hope somehow they're able to get that through. I don't know with this current.
With strong folks like you, living legend like you. I noticed somebody has made a comment to that effect. I want to support and agree with that person. Tony Hack is saying, you, Angeline Butler, is a living legend from the American Freedom Fighter Group. Yes, you are. And we salute you on this Black History Month. Let me ask you, because we are looking at the time, Miss Butler.
How much time do we have?
I know some folks can say we can go for as long as possible, but let us see how much, maybe another 10, 15 minutes or so. But
may I say something? May I say something?
Go right ahead.
Because we didn't talk about the beginning of this thing. See, we're talking about what's happening in the Americas, in the South, okay? But what about what happened in the Caribbean, okay? Like, for instance, the first Pan-African movement back in the, first of all, the first slaves that came to the Western Hemisphere were in the Caribbean, okay? And they set up coffee plantations and the whole thing, okay? And I think it was in Barbados, was one of the first places. Now, when there was change, and most people think that the British had to do with the original enslavement. The British were 200 years later than the Portuguese. It was the Portuguese, the Dutch, and the Spain that were involved in the early 1400s enslavement. And most people don't realize that. Britain got involved around 1650s, 200 and almost 50 years after the Portuguese had enslaved people. Now, one time I was on an airplane, and there was a whole bunch of Jamaicans on the airplane, and they were talking about how they weren't Black people and that they had no African origin. Okay. All right. And I had to hear that all the way from Puerto Rico to New York. Okay. And I listened to it, and it was like unbelievable to me, because we know that the first slaves that in the Western Hemisphere were taken to the Caribbean. This is before Columbus discovers that he even was lost and didn't find America that he was looking for. He ended up in the West Indies. Okay. So, and then, in South America, and then they came up through Florida, and they came into the North American continent. Okay. But when we had the change of consciousness and people were freer, it was the cultural movement, the Pan-Africanism, that was founded not by Black Americans, but by the people in the Caribbean. People like Edward Wilmot Blyden. You ever heard of him?
Yeah, Blyden.
Yeah, Blyden was one of the key people. They had a movement before anything was happening. We get all the credit over here in America, but we're not the only ones. That's what I'm trying to say. There was activism very early, and we're talking about in the mid-1800s. We're talking about 1830s, 1840s, that Pan-African movement that we know even today began with the West Indians. Okay, it did not in the Caribbean. It did not belong to African Americans in America. Okay, and I think that's very important, because when we think about today's movements and this kind of stuff, Black Lives Matter, youth programs, National Action Network, the youth programs and stuff like that. The point is, this began in the Caribbean.
Absolutely. They had the Marcus Garvey movement. They had all these other Caribbean
and Marcus
folks.
Garvey.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry.
And when Marcus Garvey, who he was in Alabama, why did he want to meet Booker T. Washington? He wanted to meet Booker T. because Booker T. Washington was dealing with the Southern problems of building us within the nation. Tuskegee Institute. All the buildings at Tuskegee Institute were built by students. They were built by students that were in school at Tuskegee Institute at the time that Booker T. Washington there. And what is he teaching? He's not only teaching reading, writing, arithmetic, and cultural studies, but he's saying you got to have a craft. And what have we gone back to today? Liberal arts is dying because people get out of college and can't find a job.
We gotta
need a
get
craft.
back to the craft.
Technology.
Indeed, we got to get back to
We
the
got
craft.
to get back to the Booker T. Washington model, okay? But it defined in terms of today's,
Got you. I got you on that. We got to get
of-
back to the craft. Indeed, that's okay. I
Okay.
know you can go on and on, which is good because you're living encyclopedia. People just appreciate the fact that you have so much information to share, and we want to hear more from you. We have lots of time, maybe not tonight. We have lots more time. I know you have a busy schedule because you're busy giving speeches all over as well. You're teaching as well.
I have
You have a
busy
play
schedule.
coming up shortly. But before we go though, you did mention the Dutch and the Dutch having control of this part of the world before the British, over 100, 200 years before the British.
And the
Just give
Portuguese.
some- yeah, I'll give some folks this. New York wasn't all the time. It wasn't New York. It was actually run
No.
by the Dutch. It was owned by the Dutch.
It was run by the
And
Dutch.
New York was
Yes.
actually Amsterdam. Here's a bit of a
Right.
fun fact. Amsterdam,
Yeah.
indeed.
And New Jersey.
New Jersey, too. Thanks. But here's what I want to
Yeah.
ask you. Tell us a little bit about this. The March in Washington, where
In
Dr.
1963.
Dr. Martin Luther King delivered this now famous I Have a Dream speech. Talk
Okay,
to us a little bit
hold
about
on a
this
second.
march.
Hold on a second.
Sure.
I'll tell you about it. Okay. First of all, Martin Luther King, I love him to death, okay? I love him and I appreciate him in a whole number. That speech was taken from Prathia Hall, a sit-in leader, when he was down in the Albany movement in 1961 and 62, okay? And he heard her talking about I Have a Dream. And that's where he got the idea of that speech. And he asked her permission in order to rewrite that speech. And
But wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Repeat what you just said again there for us. A piece of history.
Prathia Hall, a woman, a student leader, was talking about I have a dream. I have a dream that one day, this. And Luther King was there when she gave that speech. And he was so impressed with that he decided to use that theme, not her actual speech, but her theme, the content of her speech.
Was that the part? Because I read somewhere, I'm not sure if it's her, that she was at that march in Washington because he had a script. He was reading from a script, and then he diverted from that script when she said, Dr. Martin Luther King, tell us about that dream. Tell us about that dream. Was that her?
I don't know if that was Prathia Hall or not. I don't remember that.
Oh, okay.
But I will say this. What we have to understand is why a march on Washington could occur in 1963. First of all, it was not Martin Luther King's idea. It was James Bevel's idea to have a march on Washington. And then A. Philip Randolph had tried many years before that, the one that was head of the Pullman car porters. He did not pull it off. But because of what was happening in the country, where thousands upon thousands of students had been jailed from 1960 to 63, that's where you got the impetus to have a march on Washington. It's not what happened in Alabama in 1955 with Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks, E.D. Nixon, okay? But it was what was happening with the Student Nonviolent Committee, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Student Nonviolent Organizations, the Democratic Society, the National Student Association, the Nashville Student Nonviolent Central Committee, the Florida A&M students who had gone to jail for 49 days. They were arrested and given 60 days in jail. Patricia Stevens and Priscilla Stevens. It's what they were doing all over the country that gave the impact that the timing was right. And students solicited people. James Bevel wanted to march from Montgomery all the way up to Washington, D.C. And that's what he presented to Martin Luther King, the original idea of the March on Washington in 63. But then they couldn't figure out Andy Young and all of them, and it's documented in Andy Young's book.
And Andy Young, you're talking about the first Black governor of Georgia there, Andrew Young, that is.
No, Andrew Young, was he governor? He was never governor. He was the congressman, Andrew Young.
Congressman
Andrew Young.
Yeah.
Okay,
and also
but he
US
he was public relations for Martin Luther King's organization.
Got you.
With Wyatt T. Walker being the chief officer, he was a minister. But anyway, it's what the students are doing.
Let me just apologize. I'm not challenging you on history at all. You're walking encyclopedia. But it's just that you said Andy Young. I'm like, okay, yeah. Andrew Young.
Congressman Andrew Young.
Yeah.
Who is still living.
Yeah.
And still doing a lot of work.
And you were with Marion Barry and all those others.
I was with Andrew Young. I was with Marion Barry. I was with Stokely Carmichael. I was with everybody. We were the
Shirley
team
Chisholm,
that was
all
in the
these
leadership.
people you were with. You've got to come back again. You've got to come back. But before we go, though, look, we really appreciate the fact that you took time out of your busy schedule to be here. We also appreciate the fact that you have made that sacrifice with others, because had it not been for brave folks such as you, a lot of us possibly would not have been here enjoying, so to speak, whatever sort of benefits we were enjoying. All the people from the Caribbean and other parts of the world. Some like to put down folks of African descent, but a lot of these very people are enjoying the sweetness because of sacrifices made. Let me ask you, activism then compared to activism now, what is your take? And what is your advice?
There's no comparison. There's no comparison. I mean, look at Occupy Wall Street. What happened? People didn't meet the leadership. They were an internet organization. That is how they communicated with people. Black Lives Matter, literally, very similarly. You don't have them working with the grassroots people on a regular basis, or and organizing local voting in each community, and one-on-one visitations through the house. We canvass in the community one-on-one, and we talk to people in going down to register to vote, or talk to people in coming down to march. They don't do that anymore because we have a problem in America. We have violence in America. We have people who don't trust each other anymore. We have 6-year-olds shooting school teachers, okay, with guns. We have, we can always talk about Black incarceration, okay, but I'm more interested in what's been happening with the youth. These people that are under 25 who think that, who've been going and killing people in schools and stuff. We have so much violence. We didn't have that kind of violence to deal with when I was coming up, Oh, 1 or 2 people may be fighting or something like that, but we didn't have, people using guns with each other, except to protect themselves, against, invaders in their house or something like that. We didn't have the gangs that you see now in inner city communities. We didn't have the suicides that we see, results of and alcoholism and drugs that we saw in the late 70s, 80s, 90s, and we still see in the inner cities, but not to the extent that we saw it, let's say, in at the turn of the century, like in the 2000. Okay, it was really bad in inner cities in Detroit and Chicago, and people have worked very hard. Operation Push. A lot of people have been working. National Action Network. I have to name them, because the National Action Network has a lot of youth groups in the country.
And that's
The way
National Action Network that is headed by the Reverend
Al Sharpton.
Al Sharpton. Yeah.
Yeah, but the NAACP always had a lot of youth groups, and the YWCA and the YMCA had youth groups, and that really was, bailing out young people in the summer times. You probably heard of Mary McLeod Bethune. She was the most prominent person outside of Booker T. Washington in her day.
I know Mary.
Yeah, well, a lot of people haven't, believe it or not, haven't heard of Mary McLeod Bethune, but she was, very much interested and a promoter of youth groups and stuff. Now, I think this is the area we need to work in, because one of our problems with the youth is that they're coming from broken homes. They don't have the family structure that we had when we were in the South. See, when I went to school, if we didn't behave well, and let's say somebody had to discipline me, I not only was disciplined in the school, I was disciplined when I went home too.
In the community too, in the villages.
Yeah.
I recall those days in Guyana, in the countryside. Yeah. That's what it was like.
Yeah, and so you had more respect. You had more respect.
South Carolina, growing up in South Carolina and so forth. I spent some time in a little town in South Carolina called Waldoboro.
Yeah, I know where it is. Yeah.
South Carolina.
Yeah. But, well, anyway, Black Lives Matter. My problem with them is that they're able to get people to rush out when an incident happens. But we need them in the community working on a daily basis with the people in the inner cities. We have many programs that are going on in the schools and this kind of stuff, and people are really working hard to help students, but the point is, who's helping the kids in the inner city that are dropping out of school? Who's helping the kids now? We got a more terrible thing right now. Marijuana is legal. I saw a young man standing up the other night. He was off balance and a whole number in my building. And I said, you're drunk. And he says, how do you know? I said, because you can't stand up straight.
Stand up straight. 8 minutes after 9 o'clock. I know we can. Look, quickly.
And all of this is not good for us.
I know a lot of people have been recently talking about, and we'll just close off with this here. Not segregation, but we are hearing about apartheid Guyana. It's supposed to be a rich country with lots of oil. Apartheid Guyana, where mainly persons of African descent are being ill-treated by the installed regime. My description and so forth there. What advice do you have for young politicians who should be standing up for the rights of their constituency, standing up against injustices and so forth? Not just the politicians, but activists and so forth. What advice do you have for them, Ms. Butler, with your years of experience?
They've got to organize grassroots. And they got to get a lot of people supporting them. Otherwise, they're not really going to be able to make a difference. Do you understand? It's when the massive number of people speak out that the voices are heard better. And I don't know what organization that would take in a place like Guyana, right?
Correct.
I've never been there, okay? And the societies are different from here. And so those guys can't be just sort of appointments and salaries paid. They've actually got to go out to the people and get people involved in organizing in the local communities. And they've got to do that with all of the different organizations that are there. I'm sure there are a lot of social clubs and stuff, but you can turn those into meaningful meetings about what's going on. If you got the right people going in there speaking, and if you got the right people talking to those people that change their consciousness and tell them to stop partying and let's get to work on changing our world.
Absolutely. I love the message. I love the advice. You have something coming up in March. You want to talk about that, or let's just leave that?
Oh, that's the Jackie Robinson that I knew
at John Jay
College.
Yeah,
Well, the reason, okay, see, another jail experience I had in 1960 was when the Congress on Racial Equality.
But you don't want me to talk about my jail experience as a former political prisoner and spending 5 years in solitary confinement. One of these days I'll talk.
Where were you?
That's in Guyana.
Oh, in Guyana. You went through that.
Yeah,
you're like a Nelson Mandela for us.
We have, thank you, but we have something in common. Tonight is your night. I want to give all respect and salute to you for your contributions that you have made over the years. You're still here to talk about your story. But you were talking.
So we're talking about Miami, okay? Congress of Racial Equality. And what happened to us was James Farmer, who was at that point head of the summer workshops that CORE wasn't just sponsoring that year. They had sponsored other workshops since 1942. But because the climate, was sit-ins, jail, no bails, they decided to get involved in that. And so they decided they wanted to desegregate Miami because across the water, Miami Beach, a lot of rich people go there for vacation and stuff. That was pretty integrated. But you come right across the water and it's like you're in the state of Mississippi, okay, with all of the racism and stuff. So we were talking about nonviolence in the workshops. And of course, many of us had already gone to jail. In fact, all of us of the 18 that were arrested had already gone to jail, like Timothy Jenkins and Dottie Miller. We all gone to jail before that. Anyway, so we were testing in small groups, much like the Nashville model. Some 57 restaurants in Miami downtown. Most of them served us. But then we came to this big shopping complex, brand new, where 40% of the business was done by Black people. And we couldn't go in the local cafeteria and have lunch. So they kind of threw us out the first day we went in there. And they, threw out the people too. They just closed the place. So we decided to make it our focus. And so the second day when we went back, they actually had us arrested because we refused to leave. And then I ended up on the 23rd floor of the Dade County Jail in Miami. And there with Priscilla Stevens and Patricia Stevens, who had led the Florida A&M movement. And it is there that we meet Jackie Robinson for the first time. He's very concerned about us because the charge is very stiff. For that arrest, it was ejection of undesirable guests. Now imagine we're 17, 18, and 19-year-old college students. We're asking for lunch to be served to us. And we are being charged with a state statute, ejection of undesirable guests, which carries a sentence of 6 months mandatory in jail. So when Jackie heard about that, he read about it in the Miami News, which is the Black newspaper down there. He decided to get involved and come and support Congress on Racial Equality, which he was already on its board and this kind of stuff. And my relationship with him and Priscilla's relationship and Patricia's relationship, we were with him until he died. That's 1960 to 1972, I believe. And he treated us like we were his family. His wife treated me for many years. She took me out to 13 lunches after Jackie died. Just Rachel Robinson and myself, and she invited me over to the Jackie Robinson Foundation. I have this wonderful book that she wrote, and she's autographed it to me, and she made me take a picture with her that day, which I don't have anymore.
I'm sure you have all those good memories, those beautiful photographs. We really appreciate, I know, Miss Butler, you can go on and on. You're a walking, you're a living encyclopedia. I can't wait to be at that show. Are you going to
Well,
tell
this
the
is
people?
for the benefit of students from mainly at John Jay, because we find that when we ask who Jackie Robinson is, those students really don't know Jackie Robinson.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm just going to let our listeners know that it's an honor to have been invited to play a part in your play and to also,
Oh, it's March 6th. It's Monday, March 6th at 1:30, and we're in a conference room, a large conference room on the 964, which is new building. But you can't come to John Jay unless you proof of
that you're
vaccination.
vaccinated. Yeah.
Right, and ID, and then you bring, you tell them that you're coming to the Jackie Robinson play upstairs on the 9th floor in the new building. Angeline Butler.
And let them know that I'm an actor now too. Thank you for inviting me. Look,
Yes, and you're going to play Cedric Pickford. He's a school athletic director for the Herman Ritter School, which Herman Ritter School in 1929 was built for inner city families and stuff, Puerto Ricans and Blacks who were, very low income, and they were trying to improve their education. So that building is astronomical that they built there at that school. And I showed the building while you're giving us that wonderful long monologue.
And thank you so much, because that is going to enhance my acting career. You never know.
And Jackie Robinson came up there to that school, and that's what that speech is about.
Absolutely. And I thank you so much for your time. Don't be a stranger. You and I are always in touch with each other. If I need to get in touch with whoever else, you're always there to assist. You're one of the best that they have teaching there at John Jay as well. Thank you so much for all that.
It's a nice thing for you to say.
Thank you so well. I gotta say that because I think you give me an A minus, or this is going to elevate it to A plus now, right? But you are a very fair person. Like I said, you have so much knowledge in terms of your history, your personal experiences, and so forth. I salute you on this Black History Month on behalf of all our listeners. Your closing remarks to the folks who are watching, who are listening to you right now. Your closing remarks, please.
I think we all need in this day and time to lose our selfishness and to think about all of the things that are happening in the world, and to try to find a place that we can volunteer and actively do something to make this a better world.
Thank you so much. We wish you nothing but the best. God bless you, and have a great night, and see you very soon. We will talk. Thank you. Bye-bye. Angelina Butler there for us, a walk-in encyclopedia. Please go Google her, and you'll find out more about her and the struggles that she has endured on behalf of all of us who are enjoying the sweetness now. All of us, whether in Brooklyn, whether in Queens, whether in Staten Island, all over. We thank her so much, and people like her. You know what I mean? People like her. My name is Mark Benschop. I'll be back tomorrow evening with Attorney at Law Shellen Washington. Attorney at Law Shellen Washington is going to be with us tomorrow evening, and we are going to get back to Guyana, right, to talk about the injustices there in Guyana, that little apartheid state under the installed PPP regime. Let us not forget that, right? My name is Mark Benschop. Good to be back with you guys. Hope I stay with you guys. I hope I don't disappear for a few more days. But I want to be with you guys. Encourage me to be with you guys, right? All right. So that's it. Thanks again, Miss Butler. Thanks to all of you, beautiful people who are watching us this evening. Until then, God bless you all. So long.
Hello, this is Attorney Shellen Washington, owner and founder of the Washington Law Firm, located at 455 Utica Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. We're specialized in medical malpractice, personal injuries, matrimonial law, and landlord and tenant. If you're in need of legal representation, please give us a call today. The number to call is 718-877-3100. Consultation is free at no cost to you. So call us today to see if we can be of any assistance to your legal needs. Again, the phone number to call us is 718-877-3100.
Basement, level vibes with another one, straight up, blackness aye, who tell the truth, Mark Benschop, defend the ghetto youth, Mark Benschop, radio station is the fruit, Mark Benschop, straight up from the root, Mark Benschop, who tell the truth, Mark Benschop, defend the ghetto youth, Mark Benschop, radio station is the fruit, Mark Benschop, straight up from the root, Mark Benschop, I do it for the love, him not do it for no money, straight up, him attack, educating everybody, big up my friends, and big up my family, turn on the radio, catch the vibes, it's integrity, straight up, Benschop stands for unity, one people, one nation, one destiny, free up the truth in the air, even the blind can see, the deaf can hear, the dumb can talk, the cripple can walk, boom, who tell the truth, Mark Benschop, defend the ghetto youth, Mark Benschop, radio station is the fruit, Mark Benschop, straight up from the root, Mark Benschop, who tell the truth, Mark Benschop, defend the ghetto youth, Mark Benschop, radio station is the fruit, Mark Benschop, straight up from the root, Mark Benschop. We have to gather wrong, grab a seat and sit down, pay attention, education, liberation, we have to stand strong, Benschop upon the radio, lively up the program, everybody call somebody and let them turn and tune and on the radio and catch the boom song, we boom it up already, we have to boom it up again, expose and reveal him, who tell the truth, Mark Benschop, defend the ghetto youth, Mark Benschop, radio station is the fruit, Mark Benschop, straight up from the root, Mark Benschop, who tell the truth, Mark Benschop, defend the ghetto youth, Mark Benschop, radio station is the fruit, Mark Benschop, straight up from the root, Mark Benschop, I do it for the love, him not do it for no